Where the Wonder Lies. Written and narrated by Kieran Marsden. 1. It was working night shifts that made me crave the mountains. I had time to think, and in the silence I questioned. Removed from the distractions of daytime, I realised what it's all about. During long nights, in hidden, sleepy hours, I craved a cooler air. I wished to gaze at green hills and feel lake water on my skin. Being an Englishman, thoughts swayed to the Lake District, a serene corner where the wonder lies. I envisioned taking a tent to a valley I visited often as a child. I fantasised about sitting there, enjoying a beer with a slight fruity zest, gazing out at a setting sun of matching colour, while surrounding mountains fade into a sleepy grey underneath a red and purple sky, listening to the distant cry of an eagle. But no, I was working in a care home. I was going from door to door, collecting human waste, like Dracula's twisted cousin. I would sometimes catch my reflection in a mirror, dirty brown cleansing wipe in hand, and wonder, what happened? This isn't where I was supposed to be as I approached 30. I think it was the silence of the night that made me realise how futile it all is. Why do we get up and do half the things we do? Working to make the rich richer so they can buy things they don't need. I realised freedom is in letting go. I needed a trip to get far away from all the crap, quite literally. I would go where golden eagles soared and crystal clear water reflected perfect peaks. I would stand at the highest point of this nation and soak in serenity, where Wordsworth once wandered lonely as a cloud. 2. Recently, I had moved in with my girlfriend, and I was beginning to hate her. I hadn't seen a smile in a month. Consequently, I had stopped doing things with my mouth as well. I think we could have had happiness. The only thing she had to do was be happy. The age gap didn't help, but then again, maybe it didn't make a difference. The simple truth is that when we were behind the same door, paying council tax, she thought she had a license to be miserable and shower me in shit. We had met the year before at a care home. She never really caught my eye, not until she was naked in a hotel bed with me. It was a spur-of-the-moment night, orchestrated by a guy I knew who wanted to get with some girl. We were invited to ease the awkwardness. He didn't get lucky, but I did. The drunken fumble we shared was followed by messages, soon followed by an invite to my place. Then followed by acts that couldn't be performed the first night, as we hadn't been the only ones in the bed that night. For a year our bodies craved one another. Words were seldom exchanged over real subjects. I liked her dogs though. I think the beginning of the end was probably when my dad had that barbecue. The sun shined down on family members, sat around a wooden table decked with drinks and food. Yes, there was plenty of alcohol. My dad laughed as he tossed a salmon stuffed with lemons onto the grill. My grandma winked as I caught her feeding cheese to the dog. My little sister serenaded us with laughter, making everyone smile. Everyone, except her, my girlfriend. Let's be honest, being around the other half's family can be awkward. But sitting there looking seriously pissed off on a summer's day is just bad manners. I remember I had caught my other sister and brother-in-law whispering comments to each other about my guest's face. "Daniel, are you going to play on the swing with me?" asked my little sister, tugging my hand. "All right," I sighed, planting my beer on the table. "Yay!" she exclaimed, leading me across the lawn. She sat on the homemade swing that dangled from an oak tree. I pulled her back and let her drop from the highest point I could. The family watched, and I could see a look of love in my dad's eyes, watching his eldest and youngest share a moment of fun and happiness. His family surely being his greatest achievement. From the table, a choir of teeth smiled, but there was a dead note. I don't know if I should write so honestly, but it was a face only acceptable on a child the same age as my little sister, not a woman in her early 20s that I was intimate with. Her face scowled at me. "Why are you not paying attention to me instead?" it sort of said. I tried not to look over as I continued to push my little sister. Much to her dismay, I returned to the table and picked up my beer. I tried smiling at my girlfriend, but she was having none of it. After some delicious salmon, with freshly toasted bread, drizzled in olive oil, and more drink, the conversation became loose and lovely. Everyone was a little tipsy, some more than others, but in particular, my cousins Peter and James. They were both in their late teens, and as brothers usually are, they were a little competitive. "You like whiskey then?" I questioned Peter, the older of the two, gesturing at the amber liquid in his glass. "I got a bottle for my 19th birthday, last week. I prefer it to beer, actually," he replied proudly. "It's not for me. I can't relax with it." "Do you just drink it with Coke?" "Pretty much. I've never really tried it with much else," he shrugged. "You should drink it straight," chimed in his little brother James. "You can talk," said Peter dismissively. "You don't even like drinking." Of course, it's become a competition. "Yeah, I do." "When? I've never seen you drink." "I do, just not with you. I have mates, unlike yourself," said James with a sarcastic grin. "All right then," Peter laughed. "And, what do you drink with these mates?" "Anything," James replied unconvincingly. "What, like, straight whiskey? Maybe. I don't know. Why not?" James looked down at his feet, with a frown on his face. "You definitely wouldn't drink it straight," said Peter with a smirk, sipping his drink. "I would. I'm not a wimp like you." "Oh, that's some big talk there, James," I said, curious to see how the situation would develop. "Right then," said Peter, before taking a pint glass and unscrewing the cap of his prized bottle of whiskey. The pair had drawn a small grinning crowd, and by this point we all watched with alcohol-fueled enthusiasm. Almost all of us, that is. That's enough," said the boy's mother, as the amber liquid filled a third of the glass. "Go on then, big boy," said Peter, sliding the glass across the table towards James, who shrugged his shoulders, picked up the glass, threw his head back, and poured the liquid down his throat. I waited for a cough or a wince, but it never came. "He took that bloody well," said my brother-in-law, as we all showed our appreciation. "Your turn now, Peter," said James. Realising the favour of the crowd had turned against him, Peter blushed a little and gave a slightly nervous laugh. "I don't think so. Besides, that was good, but he couldn't do it again." James grabbed the bottle from his brother's hands, poured another, overconfident drink. This raised more than a few eyebrows, and even the odd, "I wouldn't," from wiser minds. The whiskey was down nonetheless. Many laughed and some shook their heads, knowing that James would soon discover the punchline for himself. That beautiful summer afternoon gave way to darkening skies and cooler winds. But red wine kept us warm, and we talked until the stars looked down upon us. "Where's that bloody dog?" said my dad, wandering around the garden with a contented smile on his face. "Leave him alone," replied my stepmother. "You can't leave him alone. He's probably in the bin eating someone's leftover salmon by now." "Well, let him enjoy your cooking. Take it as a compliment." My dad scoffed and swigged some wine. "That dog doesn't know the meaning of manners. And he's got a face like a bitch," he said under his breath, amusing himself. "Ray? What? He has. He's got no jowls, you see." "Leave him alone. He's lovely just the way he is. You love him, really," said my stepmother, laughing. "He's all right, I guess, when he's sleeping." "He is cheeky," said my grandma sleepily. "Yeah, 'cause you make him that way. I saw you earlier, slipping food under the table when you think no one was looking. No wonder he's gone mad for fish," said my dad. "I don't know what you're talking about," said Grandma, looking away, pretending to be insulted. The last one was much better. He was well behaved, and he had a big square head. Yeah, he was a real dog. At that moment, the dog wandered into the garden, licking his chops. "Here he is. What you been up to, eh? Been in the bin, haven't you? You little—" My dad tried his best to look displeased, but a belly full of wine was his undoing, and he smiled affectionately. The old pooch saw his master's grin and walked over to sit by his side. My father patted a well-fed dog on his chest, where a little patch of white fur made the shape of a heart. "Ah, see how he loves you," said my sister, pulling out her phone and taking a picture. The camera flashed, and the image was passed around. The men smiled and nodded, and the women said, "Ah." "So Laura, said my aunt to my girlfriend, who had declined to look at the photograph. How did you and Daniel meet then? At work? Yeah. There was a short, silent pause. Oh, well, do you enjoy your job? I imagined it's very fulfilling. My aunt was confident, determined to make a breakthrough. Yeah, I suppose. Is it challenging? I'd struggle to cope, I reckon. Yeah, Laura shrugged. Oh, right then. With a sigh, my aunt swigged her glass of wine and accepted defeat. After another short silence, my brother-in-law couldn't help himself any longer. I bet you're constantly chatting at work, aren't you, Laura? Everybody laughed. I smiled and looked at my feet, and Laura just looked confused. My dad, who had laughed the hardest, then slowly stood up and picked up his glass of wine. And smiling, he said quietly as he turned away to wander up the garden into the kitchen. Oh, don't be mean. You're just a bit shy, that's all, isn't it, Laura? Said my stepmother, ever the optimist. Do you want some more Malibu? No, thanks, said Laura. Doesn't drink, doesn't speak. What do you do, Laura? Said my uncle. His disdain had begun to show. My stepmother glared at him. My girlfriend just sat there and shrugged indifferently, as if performing some kind of satirical imitation of herself. I started to feel uncomfortable and reached for my beer. Much to my relief, an opportunity to escape was about to present itself. Oh dear, said my dad, wandering back towards the group, with a smile on his face and a piece of cake in hand. What are you smiling at? Said my stepmother. Oh dear, oh dear. He placed his glass of wine on the table and rubbed his eyes, red from laughter and drink. The whole evening had amused him greatly. There's a job for you in the bathroom, Daniel. Given your line of work, I think you're the man for the job. Why, what's up? I asked, glad to have the focus shifted away from my girlfriend. Just go have a look. You'll see. I got up and headed into the house. The sound of chatter and my father laughing to himself faded away as I went. Under the bright light of the toilet was my cousin James. His head was on the floor next to the toilet bowl and his jeans were around his ankles. He was entirely on display, and yet his dignity was nowhere to be seen. I leaned over the bowl and took note of the semi-digested salmon and yellow liquid floating around in there. James, are you all right? He groaned, confused and startled, but his eyes remained shut. His head made a dull thud as it hit the ceramic on the side of the toilet. Yeah, he said slowly, with great effort. Have you had any water to drink? No. As he mumbled, a bead of saliva trickled out of his mouth, making a string to the floor. Come on, mate, let's get you up, I said, pulling him upright and up onto his feet. As he swayed from side to side, I pulled his jeans up and straightened him out, with surprising ease. So it was true. I had become worryingly good at dressing other people. With his arm over my shoulder, I then helped him into the kitchen and sat him down at the table. As I was passing him a large glass of water, Laura stepped in from the garden. Oh dear, is he okay? The most words she had spoken all day. I'm okay, slurred James, his eyes crossed. Thanks, Dan. No worries, mate. Daniel, are we staying inside now? I'm freezing out there. Laura revealed her reason for coming inside. Sure, you can come in if you want, but I don't want to look rude. She crossed her arms, unsatisfied with my answer. For fuck's sake. If you do that, your sister will want to play with my phone. It's so annoying. We both looked through into the living room, where my sister peered up at the television. Daniel, are you coming to watch Curious George? George is being naughty, she said, giggling. My heart felt warm and I laughed, and I turned back to Laura, who just looked back at me with unamused eyes, and the warm feeling turned into a latent unease. Our room's through there, isn't it? She gestured down the hall. I'll just go get ready for bed then and wait for you there. Really? Her lack of joy could still surprise me. Yeah, why? Nothing, I said, barely able to believe that she couldn't see how rude she looked, but at the same time, slightly relieved she wouldn't be around for the rest of the night. I went to go kiss her on the cheek, but she moved her head, and she was gone. I watched her walk away. "Daniel," said my cousin behind me, slowly sinking into his chair. "Yeah?" "I think I'm going to be sick." I reached for a bucket kept under the kitchen sink, and my cousin proceeded to vomit into it. "Come on, Daniel. Come and watch George be naughty." "Just hang on a minute." I stuck my head out the back door and made my family aware of James, his condition and location. They let out an ironic cheer, and I could just make out their smiling faces lit by the glow of a small fire my dad had started in the fire pit to keep them warm. "Good lad. I knew you were the man for the job," said my dad, raising a glass of wine. I laid my hand on my cousin's shoulder. "James, down that pint of water when you've stopped throwing up, okay? You're going to feel awful for a bit, and tomorrow doesn't even bear thinking about. But you're going to be all right, mate." "Thanks, Daniel." "No worries. And don't listen to what they say. You took that whiskey like a man. Well done. I'd have done the same thing once." James gave a weak smile. I passed through the archway separating the kitchen and the lounge and sat beside my little sister. She told me all the characters' names. It wasn't long before she was fast asleep, and the rest of the family had come in to join us indoors, not without taking it in turns to make little jokes at young James's expense as they passed through the kitchen. After just a little more wine, everyone was soon calling taxis, or made their way home. And before long, it was just me and my dad left alone in the living room. "Where's Laura?" my dad said, confused, looking around the now empty room expecting to see her, if not hear her. "Oh, she went to bed about an hour ago." I said these words without holding back my disappointment. "An hour ago? God, I hadn't even noticed. No offence." "None taken," I replied with a smile. My dad smiled back knowingly, almost like he knew what I was thinking before I did. "Oh dear, well, think I'm off to bed. It was good that, wasn't it? Anyway, good night." "Yeah, it was good. Night, Dad." "And where the hell have you been?" she said, laying on the airbed with her eyes shut, as I gently closed the door behind me. "Can I just put the light on for 1 second?" "No." "Really?" I was tired and in no mood for an argument. "I can't see a thing." "Yeah? Well, I'm trying to sleep." Her tone almost made the room feel physically colder. "Yeah, well, I'm trying to get into bed, and I won't get far if I can't see it." "Oh, for God's sake, do what you like," she snapped. "Shh! Talk quietly. You'll wake up my little sister." "Bloody hell. I wish I got half the attention that she did." "What? I see you every day. I see my sister once every couple of months, if that. There's a big difference." "Yeah, well, you know it's not very nice being somewhere that you don't know anyone, especially when they start taking the piss out of you." "Nobody was taking the piss out of you." Feeling she was undeserving of my sympathy, I was lazy in my attempts to reassure her. I finished undressing, turned out the light, and slipped under the duvet. She flinched. I moved away when our bodies touched. And by the way, they were taking the piss out of me. "Shh! Please, not so loud." "Oh God, you're pathetic." "Pathetic?" It took me by surprise how much her words stung me. "Yes, pathetic." "Okay, whatever. Good night." I rested my head on the pillow and tried hard to let my thoughts take me away. "I suppose that's it then." I said nothing. I listened to her huff and sigh, but she said nothing more. I started to think how 10 years earlier I had slept in this very spot. Before I left home to go to university, I would have laid right here in my teens, wondering what the future held. Only one other girl had slept with me in that room. My first girlfriend. In ways, my first and current were similar, but at the same time completely different. The first had smiled a lot more, but was flawed in the same way. That almost universal human tendency to be self-centered and lacking in self-awareness. I didn't, and still don't blame them. It takes time and hard work to find an inner peace and to not have to rely on another person to provide you with happiness and security. As the night moved on, so did Laura's hands. They moved down my body to an area that on any man is always welcome to an attractive woman, no matter your state of mind. She didn't speak a word, but as her lips moved, they spoke with mine in silence. and then they went to talk to another part of my body. I listened intently. It was the only language I enjoyed hearing her speak. But by that point, she could be anyone. Soon I began to talk back in silence, and when our quiet conversation reached its conclusion, we cuddled. It was the same every night. It was how we said good night, good morning, and everything in between. Three. My girlfriend and I had recently moved into a nice little modern house in town, and to be honest, I liked it. For the first time in my life, I felt settled. The rent was low, and we didn't want for much, so we only worked 28 hours a week. This left plenty of time for relaxing at home with a good book, cook some good food, or relax in the garden with a cold beer during a wonderful hot summer's day. I may not have been a millionaire. I wasn't famous or followed by millions on social media, but I had a little place to call my own. I had my own space, where I could do whatever I wanted in peace, and at the end of the day, what more does a man need? There was only one issue. Much to my disappointment, Laura had decided to become a bitch. I think she could sense my contentedness, and that most fickle of human traits, jealousy, had begun to take hold. Of course, life wasn't going to let me have it all my own way, was it? I think the first time I knew there might be a problem was one of the many visits from her mother. We had perhaps been living at the apartment for less than a month at a time. Her mother waltzed through the French doors, escorted by her 2 little chihuahuas that ran up and assaulted my face with their tongues. "Hi, Daniel. Is Laura here?" "Hey, Mercy. Yeah, just in the bedroom." "Laura!" she shouted. Laura had confined herself to the bedroom. It was something she did regularly, for reasons I barely understood. She often wouldn't talk to me for hours. I'm pretty sure she just wanted me to chase her. But I was in my late 20s and I wasn't prepared to do so. Not in a flat so small anyway. It just wasn't a game I was prepared to play. So normally, I would just crack open a beer and sit in the sun with a book. Which annoyed her. "Hi," said Laura, not looking as pissed off as usual. "I'm making a cup of tea. Are you having one?" "Yeah, we'll put sweetener in it. It's on the microwave," replied Laura. No, they didn't offer me one. "So, how's the new job going, Mum?" "Do you know what? It actually isn't bad. I know, I was complaining at first, but I'm getting used to it, it's okay. It's so easy, really." "Do you have to put a lot of personal care in for them?" "No, not really. Like the last guy I went to. I literally made him a cup of tea, put something in the microwave for him, and that's it. Home care isn't that bad." It's just a shame about the pay." "Still not getting paid for your travels," said Laura. They spoke about the new job, and I resigned myself to playing with the dogs in the garden. After a few throws of the ball, I entered the house to get a drink. Her mother was on a rant about some guy she has to work with. She was saying how she hated him, and she hadn't even been there a week. At this point, I added to her agitation. "Hate? That's a strong word. You've only been there a week. You must barely know the guy, Mercy." I said, "All right, keep your hair on. Having said that, you haven't got much left, have you?" The mother of my girlfriend shot down my sincerity with a cold mockery. "I know it's bad, isn't it?" said Laura, weak and grovelling next to the matriarch, avoiding eye contact with me. It's true, my hair was going thin on top, and that's fine. What they had said hadn't bothered me in the slightest. However, it's the way and why it was said that left a bitter taste in my mouth. There was no smile, no laughter, no humour. It was purely with the intention to hurt me. My crime? Suggesting they shouldn't be so quick to judge people so negatively. That you should maybe keep an open mind. As the conversation moved on without even looking at me, like I wasn't even there, I couldn't help but feel like I was in the presence of 2 ugly, twisted sisters with tainted souls. It was then that I realised I had never heard them say a good word about another person. I smiled to myself and left the 2 dogs to talk inside, while I went to play with the purer, more beautiful creatures outside in the sun. Another couple of weeks passed, and living with her was becoming just unbearable. My best friend had refused to come round. "Sorry, mate. I just don't feel comfortable around Laura. It's like I've done something wrong, but I don't know what," was his comment. I wanted to say, "Try living with her," but felt ashamed and just said, "I understand." She never spoke to me, and if she did, it was just to tell me what I had done wrong. I'm not sure if I had mentioned this already, but we were working at different places by this point. Anyway, the UEFA European Football Championship had begun, and one night it was England's first game against Russia. Well, after a hard day's work of wiping a lot of arses, I quickly made my way down to the pub in town, where a few of my friends were watching the game. I had only missed the first 10 minutes, and as I was ordering a beer at the bar, I heard a cheerful voice come up behind me. "Well, hey, here he fucking is, about time," said Stan Benso, or Benno as we like to call him. Benno is a great guy, a guy who will always help a mate in need. He has some bravado, and tries to epitomise working-class masculinity that defines us all in some way or another. But if you scratch beneath the surface, there's a softer man, a kind man he wouldn't necessarily want you to know about. "Had a great day cleaning arses, son," said Tim Kenny, or TK as we knew him. For all intents and purposes, TK was my best friend. We had spent about 4 years in cohabitation, in various flats. We had the same interests in the cool refreshment of a cold pint and a ridiculous, stupid sense of humour that only me and him seemed to find funny most of the time. Many of our jokes wouldn't be out of place in a Monty Python sketch, just without the right dramatisation and visualisation. We were often left sounding a little crazy. Maybe we just had better imaginations than everyone else. "Oh yeah, absolutely loved it," I said sarcastically. We went and sat down with our pints. "So, how are England playing?" "Good, to be honest. Walker's having a right game." "Nice. You all right, John?" "Not bad, Saturn. Good day at the office." Saturn is my second name, by the way, in case you're confused. "Not bad. Plenty of paperwork, if you know what I mean." "We know what you mean. Wiping crap." "Shut up about it then. Stop being disgusting," said John, making everyone chuckle. "Your dad not joining us this evening?" I asked. "That reprobate's in the toilet right now," said John. "Saturn, why don't you go give him a hand?" said TK. "Hey, sorry, I'm off the clock." "Good lad, Saturn," said Benno with a cheeky grin. "He couldn't afford you anyway, Saturn," said John. "Oh!" shouted TK at the TV screen, high up in the corner of the pub. "Kane should have put that away," he added, as the whole room put their hands on their heads. "I thought he was offside, to be honest." "Oh, look, here he is. What the hell you been doing in there?" said John to his dad. His dad is an older gentleman, and quite simply, an awesome man. "Having a shit? What else would I be doing?" "Hey, Saturn, you need a drink, my good man?" No, I'm good, thank you. It's good to see you, John." By the way, he's called John too, like father, like son. "It's good to see you. Nice to see someone with a little sense sat round the table." "Oh, here he goes," said John Jr. "Sense? Don't you mean dense?" said Benno, bringing his pint to his lips. "I know what I meant. Anyone need a drink? I'm off to the bar." "Go on then," said TK, holding up his empty pint glass. "Bloody hell, sit down and enjoy the game, I'll get them," said John Jr. to his father. "I was hoping he would say that," said John Sr. with a wink. "How's the new flat, Saturn?" "I hate to sound rude, John, but I don't want to talk about it," I said with a small smile. "Oh dear. Exactly. Teething problems? Nothing to worry about, I'm sure," said the wiser man. I don't know. Put it this way. The girlfriend hasn't smiled at me in a month. Everything I do is wrong." "Well, everything sounds perfectly fine to me." "What?" "Well, take it from me as an older man, much wiser man. That's what women do. At least, when you move in with them," said John Sr. "Jeez. I guess now I know why so many depressed men come to the pub. You got that right, my lad." "What are you two women talking about?" said John Jr., putting down 3 cold pints upon the table. "Women," we said in harmony. The England game finished several pints later. The conclusion was an undeserved last-minute equaliser by Russia, leaving it a draw and the pub in a sombre mood. We sat and drank some more, took the piss out of each other, until our souls were content with the alcohol and laughter levels. I had work the next day, but the good company and average beer got the best of me. I ended up drinking about 6 pints, which was over my limit. We said our goodbyes, and I took a slightly wobbly walk home through the town on a warm summer's night. I entered the not-so-sweet home through the French doors and quietly got myself a glass of water. I tentatively opened the bedroom door to the complete silence and awkwardly fumbled off my work trousers and top and crept into bed. I lay in darkness and could feel the room swaying. Not good. Then I heard the exacerbated and frustrated air coming from the person beside me. Still drunk, I was brave enough to speak. Laura? What? Can I borrow your phone? Why? I need to call work and tell them I'm going to be sick. I can't go in tomorrow. There was a small silence. Then, You're a wanker, she said honestly. What? You're a wanker, she said with palpable hate. I laid in the darkness very still, playing over them words she had spoken and pondered about the emotion behind them. Suddenly, I saw it all so clearly. I didn't like this girl. She fully meant what she had said. In only 6 weeks of living together, she thought she had license to call me awful, untrue things. Words can be powerful, and with 2 syllables, she had killed the relationship. I knew a woman I meant to love, who could honestly call me things like that, wasn't the woman for me. Calmly, I got out of the bed and went to the spare room. I unfolded a big chair that converted into a bed and took a blanket and pillow. I got into the makeshift bed and messaged a girl from work I had on Facebook and told her I wouldn't be in tomorrow as I had been sick. Laying there, with the light on me from the corridor, I slipped into sleep. 4. As I cooked bacon and eggs the next morning, my mind had not changed. She had gone to work. Now was the difficult part, telling her how I felt. It was her birthday in 2 days' time, and we'd arranged to go to Alton Towers, a theme park. Well, that wasn't happening anymore, so I messaged her that. She came back with an obvious response. That's obvious. As if I was in trouble. I don't know if she noticed, but I barely looked at her when she came home that evening. When I went to sleep in the spare room that night, I'm sure it must have even surprised her. The next day came, and as I went off to work, I still hadn't spoken to her. Late into my shift, I received a message from her. It said something along the lines of, "Please can we go to Alton Towers tomorrow?" I was looking forward to it for ages. I messaged back, "No." Predictably came a barrage of hate text. She made out I was such a bad guy, but I didn't mind. I had stopped caring about what she thought. Again I came home, I didn't look at her, and soon I was in my makeshift bed, feeling much more comfortable than in recent days gone by. During the night, I was about to fall asleep when the corridor light dimmed slightly. Laura was at my door, and she spoke softly. "Come to bed," she said. "No," I said quietly, with a voice that had not quite woken. "Because of what I said the other night?" "Yeah." "But I said sorry." "Did you?" "Well, I'm saying sorry now." "Okay." "Please, talk to me." "What?" "It's like you don't care," she said. I just smiled softly when she said that. "What's funny?" "Nothing." "Come on, come to Alton Towers tomorrow. We will have a good day, I promise." "I can't. Sorry. It'll be too awkward." "Please." "No," I said. She stood at the door for some time, and then she asked, "Do you love me?" Well, that hurt. I couldn't say yes. It was impossible. And sitting there silently was painful too. I bit my lip and looked at the bedsheets, waiting for the sting of silence and truth to hit her. Without looking, I heard sniffling, and then crying. She came forward and sat at the end of the bed, and we both looked down. "Sorry to be this way, Daniel. I don't mean to be," she said, but I said nothing. There was nothing to say. "I know I need to be happier, but I just find it hard. There are things about my past you don't know. Please don't give up on me," she said. The truth was, there was no choice. My heart ached, and I didn't want to see her hurt, but I didn't like her anymore. "I'm sorry, Laura." As she sat there, I tried hard to keep back my own tears. As she realised, during the long silence, I wasn't going back, a more familiar version of her appeared. Then you have to go. I want you out by the end of the week, she said, wiping eyes and standing up. Okay, I'll try my best. I'm serious, Daniel. And so am I said, looking at her finally. And with that, she left my room, and I sighed the biggest sigh in months. Over the next couple of days, we didn't speak. Everything in the flat associated with me had been shoved into my little room by her. A constant reminder, you have to go. I had not paid much attention to it at all. More accurately, I wasn't going to allow her demands to worry me, because I wanted to get out of there as well. So one evening after work, I made my way downtown to Benno's house. He had done all right for himself. He was a homeowner in a semi-detached house in quite a nice part of town. He poured me a beer, and together we sat in front of his 60-inch TV, playing songs via YouTube. We liked the rock tunes of the early 2000s. We are of the generation where rock made a comeback through postmodern punk and indie. But we also loved the classics, Pink Floyd, The Roses, The Stones, AC/DC, anything with a guitar that moved you. It's definitely over then, is it? Said Benno. Definitely. I'm not the kind of guy to string something along. I'm done. It's a shame, but I can't live a lie. I'm sorry for you, man, said Benno. I'm not. I'm glad. Do you really mean that? Said Benno with a raised eyebrow. Well, sitting here with you drinking a beer, knowing I'm through with her, it's a relief, I said. It's a bit shit how you just moved in with her, though. Yeah, but whatever. It's kind of not important. What is important to me is feeling better, I said, feeling lighter. Good attitude. To be honest, you look better, more relaxed. Weird. People are normally in pieces, but you don't seem bothered, said Benno. I'm not. Is that weird? I said, taking my beer with a big gulp. I guess not. I guess you just know what you want, while most people never figure it out. Or at least they're not being honest with themselves. I guess. I bet she can't believe what hit her. I'm sure she'll be struggling, I said, feeling some empathy. Probably, but as you said, she can't keep treating someone a certain way and expect them not to change, said Benno. True. You know what? Let's not talk about it too much. Let's relax, man, I said, raising my glass. Benno touched his glass to mine. Nirvana? I said. You will never reach it, man. Ha! Well, I made a lot of ground recently. The mind is definitely much clearer. Put on heart-shaped box, I said, relaxing on the sofa. Tune, said Benno, tapping away on his phone. How's things with Rebecca? I asked. I do miss her. Anyway, I thought we were done with all that kind of chat. Sorry, man, I said. I sat back and enjoyed the beer and looked into the little blonde girl's blue eyes on the TV on the music video. The bizarre imagery sent my mind into a daze, and suddenly the music changed. You know what? I have the perfect song for me and you right now, said Benno. Listen to the lyrics. I watched the title come up on the screen. Oasis, Cigarettes and Alcohol. As I listened to that dirty guitar, I began to nod my head. I listened to Gallagher's words, and as the chorus started, Benno joined in, staring into my eyes and sending the message home. You can wait for a lifetime to spend your days in the sunshine. You might as well do the white line, 'cause when it comes on top, you gotta make it happen. Together we stayed up for hours, talking and playing the music of all varieties. As the sun came up, we were coming down. Look, mate, said Benno. It seems to me you should move in with me. It's no worries. I have a spare room, and you can pay me any rent you want. I don't mind, said Benno. Are you sure? I mean, I don't want to intrude. Intrude on what? A good time? Well, only if you're sure. I'm more than sure. I want you to. Thanks, man. Thanks a lot. It helps a lot. Perfect. Well, I'm off to bed, said Benno, leaving the room. 5. Laura was gone, and life moved on. For the rest of that summer, me, Benno and TK sat on that sofa, drank, laughed and listened to music. Maybe I should have worded that a little more poetically, being a so-called writer, but it really was that simple. I enjoyed sitting there and listening to any song our souls desired. Every weekend, more of the lads came round. We watched football, laughed at each other, and lived the idyllic life of most 20-something men. But there's only so much lager and laughter one man can take before he starts to think, is this it? Human nature is strange. It was almost always the dream for me, but in truth I wasn't happy. I was extremely content, but too content. What did I want? I had tried the serious girlfriend route, and that had ended in disaster. Now I was living with a friend and constantly laughing, yet it all felt a little defeatist. Where was I going? I had started working night shifts, and I hated them. I could never sleep during the day, and I would go to work the next night even more tired. It hadn't been my decision. It was forced upon me by management, as they were short on night staff. After the first week, I felt different. I'm sure the main reason was fatigue. Another was timing, getting no laughter with my friends. It left me feeling strange, cleaner in ways, not better, empty, almost lost, like another person. During them days that I couldn't sleep, I read Into the Wild by John Krakauer. Many will be familiar with the film. A story about Christopher McCandless, a young American who seemed to hate everything about the modern world, obsessed with finding deeper meaning in life, something he hoped he would find alone in the wilderness. I could relate to Christopher. I wanted to find something, a deeper meaning, a place, a purpose. I loved his story, and I wanted to find my own serenity in a world that at the time didn't make much sense. I wanted to look out at a fading sun, while surrounding mountains faded into a sleepy grey, underneath the red and purple sky, echoing the distant cry of an eagle. I wanted to wander, lonely as a cloud. On my next day off from work, I was in a mountaineering shop, looking at tents and walking boots. "Can I help you, sir?" said a fresh-faced teenage boy. "Yeah, I think so. I'm looking for a one-man tent for a little trip I'm planning." "Nice. Where are you heading?" "The Lake District," I said, gazing at the products around me. "Beautiful. Lake Windermere?" "Oh, I don't know yet." Nice just to get away from it all sometimes, isn't it?" he said, which I thought was strange. What did he have to get away from? His mum asking him to do the washing up? Yeah. Any advice?" "I don't want to spend a fortune," I said. "Have you ever been in a one-man tent?" asked the teen with a raised eyebrow. Don't think I have." "It's like getting in a coffin," he assured me. "Is that so?" "Yeah, I mean, there are some really good two-man tents that would perhaps be better, like this one," said the young man, taking me over to an already pitched-up green tent. It was small, and I would have presumed it was a one-man. But it was about perfect, and it wasn't long before I purchased it. We had a similar conversation about sleeping bags, and after my purchases, I took a walk into town and found walking boots in a charity shop at an absolute bargain. With my cargo, I felt better, looking at my items as symbols of serenity. They were my first major purchases in months, excluding alcohol. I felt better simply looking at them. I walked into Benno's house that evening and dumped my purchases in the corridor as he appeared out of the kitchen to greet me. "What the hell you been buying? That a tent?" "Sure is." "Don't worry, mate, I'm not kicking you out yet." "I'm arranging a little trip." "Really? Where?" "The Lake District, just for a few days." "Who you going with?" "Myself." "What?" "Just to relax for a few days, get away from it all," I said with a small smile. "Oh, I'm sorry I'm such a shit," said Benno jokingly. "I don't mean it like that. You know, a lot's been going on for me recently. It'll be good just to go somewhere and clear my head. Bask in the silence," I said. "Fair enough. Are you really going alone? Won't you get bored?" "No, I want to be alone for a bit." "I think you're nuts, to be honest," said Benno. "I probably am. Joking. It's cool you can do things like that. How are you getting there?" "Train." "Won't you need a car to get where you need to be?" "Nah, I'll walk it." "And when you get there, what are you going to do?" "Walking in the day, beers in the evening." "That's a lot of walking." "Yeah, but it's beautiful there," I said. "Gay," said Benno with a small smile. "Yeah. Well, I have a pasta bake in the oven anyway, so all is well. Tuna one. Mature cheddar, right?" Extra mature, said Benno with a sure smile. Good, it's the only way. Damn right. Coffee? Oh wait, you don't drink it in the evening, do you? Nope, not if I want to sleep tonight. Whatever. The bake will be ready in half an hour. Nice one, I said. I took my cargo to my little bedroom and laid it on my single bed. I called work and asked the receptionist for a week off work in a week's time. After a pause, she said it would be fine. The holiday was booked. Then, using my phone, I booked a return ticket to Windermere train station. It cost me £100 and would take 4 hours and 3 changes. I couldn't wait. With a click, the purchase and adventure was confirmed, and not before long, I was back on the sofa of the summer eating pasta. 6. The big day came, and I quietly left the house suited and booted. Well, walking booted and blue rain jacketed. I walked to the train station beneath the grey sky that let out gentle rain, but nothing could dampen my spirits. I was soon at the station, then on the train getting my ticket stamped. I looked out the window, and as we travelled west I watched England change, leaving the flat fields of Lincolnshire that seemed quiet in their subtle green and yellow serenity. Slowly the terrain became more awkward as we approached Sheffield, teasing a man with its rolling hills. After a quick stop in Sheffield, and a pastry and a coffee, I was on my second train en route to Manchester. The terrain moved more now. Green fields began to roll and gather life of their own, a natural character. Rain drizzled, visible on the train window, but nothing too bad. After a quick change at Manchester, I was then heading to Oxenholme, Lake District. As I looked out the window, the green hills grew, and the sun had decided to shine. Oxenholme was the last change, and then it was to Windermere. As I looked out, what I once called hills I no longer could, as cold water stretched out ahead of me. Real beauty was on the horizon. The train was made up of almost entirely Japanese men and women and children, who all wore smiles, adult faces hid behind big cameras pointing out the windows. The train pulled into Windermere, and I allowed the black-haired children and their parents past me, without a thank you. As I stepped off the train, wonderful clean air filled my lungs. Green trees seemed to serenade and free me. I stepped onto the platform and made my way down the station and exited, taking a left. The land was elevated, and I looked out. In the distance was great peaks poking over the town's buildings. Above, the sky was blue and still, but I could see no blue lake. I walked downwards into the town, past people dressed very fashionably, clothes suggesting they were relaxed but rich. Men and women outside little cafes and bars, drinking and eating overly priced food. If I was judgmental, I would say many looked snobbish, but that would be ignorant. It's not a fault to have money and to want to spend it in England's garden. I passed material freedom finders, past dogs and Japanese, and followed a big sign stating Lake. As I walked downhill, I kept capturing a glimpse of the blue between the buildings, and then I was there. I looked at Lake Windermere and smiled. England's largest lake stretched out for as far as the eye could see. Serenity surrounded me. Dreams and memories intertwined perfectly, creating momentary nirvana. I breathed beside blue water and gazed at the wonder. In the distance, hills hung over and fed me beauty, as if they were trying to glimpse at themselves. In front of me, families and swans mingled on the lake shore. Gentle waves moved, reminding us she was there. Not that anyone needed reminding. I sat on a bench and absorbed the beauty. Surely, I thought, this is England's most perfect scene. I looked past the long necks of the swans that inquired at me with black beady eyes. The cool wind of the water moved me slightly and made me shiver, but with a smile. I watched boats deport and happy tourists sway from their decks. We were all here for one reason, to bask in the lake's truly wondrous aura. I sat there for about an hour, feeling closer to inner peace, smiling at a world that was capable of such beauty. After some time of sitting in serenity, I began my hike to my destination, a long walk up a road called Kirkstone Pass. It's the road that joins Windermere and Ullswater, England's second largest lake. At times the road was narrow, weaving in and out between mountains on either side. The walk was wonderful and treacherous, as I squeezed against cobbled walls allowing cars to pass by, but I didn't mind. Each time it gave me an opportunity to take in the view. I was heading to a campsite called Sykeside. perfectly situated between England's greatest lakes. It sat in a valley beside a little body of water called Brothers Water. I was about an hour into my journey with another to go, my raincoat off, and I regularly wiped sweat from my forehead, when a welcome sight appeared, a pub, an idyllic cottage called the Queen's Head. In need of refreshment, I smiled at people gathered outside and joined them. "Where are you heading?" said a large man with a white beard and border collie at his feet. "Sykeside. Thought I'd best stop off for some refreshment," I said, holding up my beer. "Sykeside? That's quite a walk. I'm heading to Uldwater soon. I can drop you off if you want." At first, I found him extremely forward and was surprised. But I was reminded of myself. With a rucksack on, sweaty, I looked at other people, clean and relaxed, and I realised he was just trying to help a guy out. I then remembered where I was. Not in a city, where capitalism has trained us into forced politeness for individual gain. This was a real man, surrounded by the real country, where true human feelings were not tainted and distorted. "You know what? Thank you very much for your offer, but I'm enjoying this walk too much," I said, genuinely grateful. The older man smiled and supped his beer. "Good for you, son. Wish I could still walk like you. I mainly drive now and bask in the beauty. She wishes she could come with you," he said, patting his collie on the head. "But thanks anyway. Yeah, just needed some headspace and I couldn't think of a better place to come." "You got that right, son." We went back to our beers and enjoyed the silence. Soon after, with a wink, he was gone, off in his car. I washed down the last bit of beer and put on my rucksack, and I was on the road again. An hour later, I approached a sight that brought back memories. I stood beneath the red screes and smiled, a mountain I had been up many times throughout my life. I looked at the red rocks of its centre and remembered scrambling up them as a child. I looked up at the minute people near the top and envied the view they would now have. Behind me was a pub, and I resisted the urge for another beer, looking at grey clouds coming in, knowing I wasn't too far from my destination. After another hour, I finally arrived. My legs were tired, and I could feel I had done some serious walking. I looked over the little opening into the valley, and saw all the colourful tents and smiled. I paid for a 3-day stay, and was looking for a perfect place to pitch my tent. It wasn't too difficult to find a spot. I settled for a little area where nobody was too close. I opened up the tent and laid it flat, straightened out the poles and began to push them through hole openings. But things weren't making sense. It wouldn't rise properly, and it looked drunk. As I looked at greying clouds above, I wished I had practised putting up the tent up back at home. After several more attempts, and none the wiser, the rain began to fall from the sky. I'll just be honest. As the rain got harder and I struggled, anxiety and embarrassment got too uncomfortable. I looked at people in their perfectly pitched tents, with the fronts open and smiling, watching me struggle. I didn't want anyone to help and embarrass me, and just as annoyingly, they didn't. I took out all the pitching poles and realised they were different lengths. And then I noticed they were colour-coded. I reattached them, and this time to the right place. The tent went up, sober, and I sighed with relief. I fastened the metal pegs into the quickly muddying ground, and essentially I was done. I crawled into the tent, covered in mud, listening to the rain, and laughed at myself. Not long after, I ventured back into the rain with a towel and wash bag, and approached the building with the showers and toilets. In there I allowed the hot water to wash away the day's sweat and mud, and it left me feeling something unexpected. I felt alone. In the cubicle next to me, I heard a father with his son. The toddler asked many questions, and the father answered them carefully, teaching manners and morals. I could hear the love between them, and I questioned my solitude. Was I missing something? I put such deep questions to the back of my mind, got dry, and put on some clean clothes. As I exited the cubicle, I looked into the mirror in front of me. I had caught the sun, and I was bronze in colour. I decided it was time for a pint. At the top of the campsite was a pub called Brothers Water Inn. It had stopped raining, and the evening orange sun was setting. I ordered a pint of cock-a-hoop ale and took it outside and sat on a wooden bench and looked at the beauty. I'd fantasised about this moment during long night shifts. My fantasy had been a moment of divine beauty, where I found answers. But there was only silence. I sat there a little cold, looking at something beautiful but felt nothing. I did not realise divine salvation. I had no great epiphany. My only realisation was nirvana is not a place. It's a purpose. I sat there and drank my beer and once again watched dark clouds appear as the sun set behind mountains. I entered the pub with my empty glass and the barman smiled. "Another one?" "Please," I said, having to try and put my smile on. I sat in the corner with my pint and stared out a large window that overlooked Brothers Water Lake. I watched it turn completely dark as I finished my third pint. I looked at the empty glass and seriously questioned what I was doing, when a voice interrupted my thoughts. "Are you dry yet?" came a young woman's voice beside me. I turned and saw a beautiful smile in a blue jumper with a pint in her hand. "Excuse me?" "Are you dry? I saw you struggling with your tent. I felt so sorry for you. But it really was one of the funniest things I ever saw," she said, laughing and covering the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen. I sat there in silence and couldn't believe how beautiful she was. Her hair was dark, thick, slightly curled at the bottom, resting by her collarbone. The features of her face were almost so perfect, they left me silent. There was nothing to comprehend. All there was to do was gaze in wonder. "Oh, I'm sorry. Have I offended you?" she said, smiling angelically. No, not at all. You just caught me off guard, that's all," I said, reminding myself she was only human, and to talk to her like one. "Well, I can see you're all dry now. I trust you did get it up in the end." "Yeah, just about," I said, hardly able to look her in the eyes. "Do you always struggle to get it up?" she said, widening her eyes and tilting her head, then fluttering her eyelashes. I wasn't sure if she was joking until she smiled behind her pint glass and began to laugh. "Sorry, I couldn't help myself," she said, putting her beer on my table so she wouldn't spill it. "I'm Elizabeth," she said, putting out her hand for me to shake. "Hello, Elizabeth. And no, I normally don't struggle." "Good for you. And your name is?" "Daniel," I said, taking her hand and shaking it lightly. "Pleased to meet you." "Am I welcome to sit with you?" she said, tilting her head ever so slightly. "Of course, please." As she sat down and began to talk, I struggled to concentrate on her words. I just kept pondering on how gorgeous she was. "Are you alone? Don't you have any friends?" said Elizabeth with that cheeky way that had me captivated. "I've got a few, and yes, I'm alone." "I know, weird," I said. "That probably suggests you have issues, or nobody likes you." "Maybe nobody likes you because you've got issues," she said. "Probably," I said, nodding. "Don't worry, I'm here alone too. So look at me, Daniel. Do you think I have issues or that nobody likes me?" she said, sitting up straight. I resisted the urge to look at her cleavage that was definitely there, which she helped by smiling, so I became fixated on that. "Well, by looking at you, I struggle to see how nobody would like you," I said. "So you're saying I have issues then?" she said, taking a large gulp of beer and raising her eyebrows. "Tell me, what are my issues?" "I couldn't possibly say," I said with a smile. "Why?" she said with a friendly frown. "Because I don't know you nearly well enough." "Well, get to know me," she said, smiling from her eyes alone. "How do I do that?" "Questions are a good start, though that can only ever get one so far," she said. "Okay, Elizabeth, tell me, why are you here alone?" "Issues," she said with a wink, laughing but making no noise and biting the edge of her glass. "What issues?" I said, resting my elbows on the table and leaning forward ever so slightly. "Family issues." "And what's wrong with your family, if you don't mind me asking?" "They have issues." "Where are you from?" I asked. "Here, the lakes. Not too far away from here, actually. This is my little secret place I come when I can't take the weirdness anymore," she said. "I get that kind of. Sometimes I wish I had a little place of my own that I could run to, but obviously closer to home." "Where's home, if you don't mind me asking?" she said, looking serious for the first time, but just as beautiful. "Lincolnshire." Would that be, Lincoln by any chance? That's correct. That's quite far to come. True, but there's nowhere nicer in the country. I hear that a lot. I don't appreciate it enough sometimes. Even though I know it's beautiful, living here you end up taking it for granted. So Daniel, what are your issues then? Why are you here? She said, with the return of that most beautiful smile. You know, I haven't fully decided. Come looking for answers? Maybe. You know, the answers are always closer than you think, said Elizabeth, all of a sudden seeming mature. Is that right? Yeah, in my experience. Can I ask you something? A question that might seem rude. You ask and I'll see what I can do, said Elizabeth. How old are you? And don't ask me to guess. Everybody always does that. How did you know I was going to do that? Because people always do. Okay, I'm 24, and yes, I still live with my parents. Don't judge me. I don't, not in the slightest. Daniel. Yes, Elizabeth? Would you like another beer? Are you buying me a drink? Yes, I am. And in this day and age, it's not that crazy, you know. It's either that or we sit down on our own for the rest of the evening, and we don't want to do that, do we? No, I wouldn't want to do that at all. Daniel, how old are you? And if that sounds rude, I don't care, she said, leaning in and smiling. And yes, I repeat, it was beautiful. I'm 28, I said. She smiled and picked up my pint glass. Cocker? Excuse me? Cock-a-hoop ale. That's what you're drinking, right? She said. Yeah, I said, as she winked at me and walked to the bar. As I looked towards her at the bar, she leaned on it. I got a view of her figure in tight jeans. Everything was good. Even with the beer goggles on, I knew they weren't needed. I looked into the darkness, through the window, at the silver shimmer of the moon on the brothers' water, and wondered, was this gorgeous girl flirting with me? Or just being friendly, like the guy I'd met earlier? Either way, it didn't matter. I was enjoying every second of it. Here you are. Cock-a-hoop. One for you, one for me, said Elizabeth, putting the beer in front of me. We spoke for the next couple of hours until we started spilling beer, and I forgot concisely how beautiful she was. Too soon the barman told us he was closing, and as I looked around, we were the only ones, and my phone said it was 10 minutes past midnight. Best be on our way, said Elizabeth. We walked out together, down the road into the campsite, under the crystal clear stars. I just want to say, Elizabeth, it was so nice meeting you tonight. You're amazing. She said nothing, just smiled in the lights provided by the orange lanterns beside the road. I wish I could spend more time talking to you, I said. She then came to a stop. As I looked back at her, she said nothing. She just looked at me with an innocence, with her hands behind her back. Good night, Elizabeth. I hope to see you again, I said, putting out my hand, knowing I never would. She stepped forward and kissed me. I felt her body against mine and put my hands on her slim waist and kissed her back. She stopped, pulled away, and looked at me with big eyes. Come on, she whispered, taking my hands and leading me away. There was the sound of people snoring, but the only thing I could hear was her hand in mine. At her tent, she undid the zip, and we entered together. I laid there and listened to a gentle drizzle. I listened to gentle breaths and could smell faint perfume on her hair. Hundreds of miles away from home in a valley, I felt serene, complete, so perfect. Though I knew it would pass, at that moment, I had found what I was looking for.